It's kind of interesting that Wesley Snipes had originally wanted his version in the 90s to be more action fun than political, yet Ryan Coogler manages to find a proper balance between the two. He doesn't treat this as yet another installment of the MCU, he treats it as its own entity, as every shot, every action, and every line of dialogue spoken has a true purpose beyond what it originally sets out to do. The only time it ever does feel like the traditional MCU movie is mostly in the climax, but that's only on the side of the bad CGI. Chadwick Boseman is fantastic as T'Challa, and personally, I'm glad that the man's getting more recognition now. Michael B. Jordan is fantastic as Killmonger, and his speech comparing Wakanda's government treatment to America's, especially considering the bullshit chaos before and after the film's release, is definitely one of his finer acting moments. In the 10 years since The Dark Knight's release, this and Logan have been the only two big ones to break through the awards praise, and I hope to see it continue on through. Ever since Brad Bird gave us Ghost Protocol, the Mission Impossible series manages to deliver a properly flowing narrative that felt more in tune with the series than the original trilogy did, as well as deliver some of the best action scenes that I've seen in a long time. Hell, I dare even say it's probably the best action sequel I've seen since Mad Max Fury Road. While I did prefer when each film had a different director style to work with, Christopher McQuarrie takes a lot of the elements that he did right with Rogue Nation and maximizes it here in Fallout, especially since Sean Harris reprises his role from the previous film. He also manages to tie up most of the loose ends that were established since the third film, and by the end, while it does feel a little sort of similar to Return of the King, it does give a satisfying conclusion to the series overall. Tom Cruise, even in his mid-50s, proves that he can still pull off some amazing stunts for the sake of an action franchise. I gotta say, after 20 years, watching him break as many bones as he did here, my legs felt limp. Henry Cavill gives his best performance since The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Charismatic and badass, and once again, having an attitude more similar to Superman than his performances in the DCEU. Simon Pegg, Vin Rhames, Rebecca Ferguson, and Alec Baldwin all do great returning as the IMF team established over the course of the series. We even get to see more involvement with Michelle Monaghan as Ethan's former wife, so that was kinda neat. While a lot of us might have been craving what could come next from the series, I think it'd be best to leave this where it is.
Who would have thought that Jim from The Office was secretly this talented horror mastermind? Well, after looking over the script for A Quiet Place and finding deeper meaning through the story, through the parents' perspective, John Krasinski ended up giving us a touching and very tense tale about survival and what it means to be a parent. With very little use of dialogue or sounds, Krasinski manages to prove himself to not only be a powerful actor, but one of the best horror directors I've seen come out in the past few years. Plus, it's not that often that you have filmmakers utilize sign language in such a useful way, and having Melissa Simmons, an actual deaf person and brilliant actress as the daughter, adds on to the necessity. Emily Blunt gives easily the best performance I've seen from her. Since she and Krasinski are married in real life, there's a stronger connection of fear that they tap into, because nothing is scarier than being a parent that can't protect their kin. And with the decision to make an anthology series out of this, for the first time in years, I'm excited for a horror movie sequel. Hereditary is a film I would consider a contender for the scariest film I have ever seen, and that is saying a lot. Ari Aster in his debut delivered a creepy, foreboding, and downright traumatic experience that I have never seen matched since The Babadook. Toni Collette not only gives the best performance of her career, but quite possibly the best performance I've seen this entire year. If you want to see the visual definition of a mental breakdown, just go watch her in this movie and behold. Being a mother who lost two people of different generations between her in 1 year, she feels every bit of sanity cracking from underneath her. There's hardly a moment or a line where she isn't holding back her grief in every swallow of air. Gabriel Byrne does a great job as the dad, trying to calm things down and probably being the best representation of the audience. Anne Down from The Handmaid's Tale is delightfully creepy as a grief counselor consultant. Alex Wolff and Millie Sharpio as the kids are both fantastic and definitely creep you out in the right reasons. Also, I really wasn't expecting that yikes moment halfway through. If you have yet to see this movie and you're a parent, be cautious. Hell, I'm not a parent and even I felt unclean watching it.
Alex Garland is a filmmaker that deserves to be talked about in the same vein as Denis Villeneuve. I may not have fallen in love with Ex Machina like everyone else did, but it was a film I was eager to discuss with. Annihilation, however, I kept loving more and more after each viewing. The themes and concepts about the human prosperity of self-destruction is carefully analyzed among each of the characters, and in an environment that truly tests one's mental limitations to their fullest extent. Natalie Portman, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Gina Rodriguez, and Tessa Thompson, who had a hell of a year with Creed 2 doing in another film further up. All too fantastic as the team set out to investigate the Shimmer. And Oscar Isaac, despite his minimal screen time, does great as Portman's husband. This movie also knows how to truly suck you into its horror elements. The bear scene will definitely give you nightmares for the next few weeks. It's a real shame not everyone got to see this in theaters, especially with Netflix putting it out internationally. This brings us to our next category. The Cabin in the Woods really made a name for Drew Goddard, and after this, I'm not ashamed to dub this guy the next John Carpenter. The movie is a trap strangers with secrets premise, just like The Hateful Eight, but the 1960s era gives it a unique approach, especially when you cast Jon Hamm in the movie. Jeff Bridges as a bank-robbing priest is deeply intriguing because you never know if he's zoning out or in deep thought observing you. Jon Hamm, like I said, is always excellent, playing a cheesy con artist vacuum salesman. Cynthia Erivo is fantastic as a lounge singer making ends meet. With her film debut in this movie and Widows, I hope to see her more in the future. Kaylee Spaney and Dakota Johnson played two sisters on the run and proved that after 50 Shades of Grey and Pacific Rim Uprising, these two actually can act. Chris Hemsworth pretty much steals the show by the time he arrives in the hotel, and is such a delight to watch on screen. It's a shame that this ended up being a bomb, because I love talking about these kinds of genre films with people, but hopefully its life on streaming and home video will give it a second chance at life. It's kind of surprising that 2018 suddenly became the year of documentaries because we had a lot of really big ones. But if I had to choose one that really spoke to me, it was Won't You Be My Neighbor. This documentary about the life and career of Fred Rogers was one of the most nostalgic experiences I have ever had in a movie. This is coming from somebody who never grew up with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. The film goes into detail about his life and struggles that he went through to get his show on the air, and how he did everything he could to make sure it was never lost to the kids, rather than thinking about it being a job. All the people interviewed here, as well as the fans you see from stock footage, you can just feel the love that Rogers left with them all, and how it just turned them all for the better in almost every way. He was a privileged young man who could have had it all, but his morality and eagerness to bring his wisdom to the public in a way they understand best. Heck, I was bawling my eyes out when they brought up that this was his way of coping with depression and how he was doubting himself. Much like with Robin Williams, Fred Rogers and his humbleness were truly examples of something you could believe. And I do agree with this widow when she says, the world definitely needs someone like Mr. Rogers more than ever. I was 8 when my oldest brother and then girlfriend took me to see the first Incredibles in theaters, and it was one of the first films that I actually wanted a sequel to happen, and thankfully after 14 years, it did not disappoint. While I have read some people dismissing it as the first film just with the parental roles switched, and a villain with a different kind of portrayal of supers, I still feel there was a lot to get out of this film. Brad Bird is always good at family drama since The Simpsons, and he truly nailed it here as well. Bob's dedication to try and keep his family together without losing his cool, contrasting with Helen's determination to finish her job as a superhero with a villain on the loose, you feel the weight of their dilemma both back to back. The moment Bob breaks down in front of Violet is a feeling I can definitely relate to. There are a lot of people who always feel like they're downing themselves even though they're trying their best, and it always seems like everyone else doesn't appreciate your efforts. I also liked how they made the screenslaver more of a concept even after the reveal, addressing how the dependency of supers has led to the society being scared and helpless, giving us an understandable reason as to why they believe it is important to keep them underground. Not to mention, the animation is easily the best I've seen from Pixar by far. The train chase is my favorite scene in the entire movie, with the colors and lights just so striking. While I do hope that a third movie does happen, I look forward to whatever Brad Bird does have next up his sleeve. I didn't really know what to expect going into BlacKkKlansman, but what I got was a dark, disturbing, and surprisingly funny story that I had so much fun watching. The film is based on the true story of Ron Stallworth, a cop who infiltrated the Colorado chapter of the KKK with Flip Zimmerman in order to get ahead of their racist agenda. Lee brings his clever wit and direction to their most prime, but it's the acting that truly makes it fully realized. John David Washington, the son of Denzel, proves he's more than capable of living up to his father's legacy, and his scenes with Adam Driver are what make the film so enticing. The back and forth banter between these two about what cops can or can't do, as well as putting themselves both at risk from all sides, makes for some of the film's most memorable moments. Topher Grace also has a funny performance as David Duke. Laura Harrier as a Black Panther Party supporter is also great. Jasper Pacone and Ashley Atkinson as the Klan's local head organizers are also deeply entertaining despite how evil they are. Also, if you haven't seen this movie yet, let me just warn you, the ending is a bit of a downer. Other than that, this is definitely one of Spike Lee's best joints in years. This year, Sony Animation not only topped Disney, but they even delivered the best Spider-Man movie I have ever seen. The animation is so slick and stylish, like looking at an actual comic book movie being animated to life. It reminded me a lot of the techniques that the Peanuts movie did, where it slows the frame rate intentionally to give off a stop-motion feel that surprisingly works. The characters are also deeply enjoyable, even for the goofy ones like Noir Spider-Man or Spider-Ham. I was especially happy that we finally got to see Miles Morales adapted onto the big screen, even in animation form. You really get into his struggles of adapting to his new abilities, something that carries throughout the film as opposed to just the first act, and having to take on this mantle somehow is one of the best character arcs that we've seen adapted to screen, and Shameik Moore does an excellent job voicing him. I especially love his banter with Jake Johnson's Peter Parker. While he is funny, he also has his touching arc about growing up and coming to grips with being responsible for a family he never got. In fact, this film knew how to hit the emotional moments very well, especially with Kingpin's motives and Miles having to fight the people he loves most. That, and considering this was the year that we lost Steve Ditko and Stan Lee, the latter has a cameo that ironically captures how we feel, and that mid-credits tribute was definitely fitting. Rest in peace, gentlemen. Thank you for inspiring new storytellers and heroes. Before I go into talking about this one, I need to tell you about my experience going into this. When I first saw this movie in theaters, I went into the theater and it was completely dark. Like, the projector wasn't on, all the lights were off, it was just a blank, dark room, and I only could see about 1 or 2 people in the auditorium with me. And it wasn't until about the time then the trailers would typically end that we finally got the movie starting. And I gotta tell you, it was the most bizarre experience I've had for one of the most bizarre movies I have ever seen. The film is about an Oakland telemarketer who, after tapping into his white voice, becomes one of the most successful rookies to shoot to success, in one of the shadiest businesses in Total Control. Boots Riley's writer-director debut was something to behold, like something Alex Cox would do in his heyday. Subjects involving class, race, and occupations are heavily questioned in this world that something like Spike Lee would do if he was adapting a Charlie Kaufman script. Yeah, wrap your head around that for a minute. Lakeith Stanfield is so good in this role, playing the straight man who still finds surprises in this world, but not enough to seem like he's lost his sense of reality completely. Even as he lives in a mad world where it only hurts to get your word out, he still manages to keep some form of optimism left and pull through, just when he's about to call it quits. I had to do an essay on this for my film theory class, and needless to say, it was quite the trip to study. Whether you liked it or hate it, this was definitely a conversation piece worthy to talk about. So, if you haven't seen it, definitely give it a watch. Yeah, there's no denying it. This movie practically nuked everybody's expectations, and as somebody who wasn't impressed with the first 2 Avengers movies, that's saying a lot. The Russo brothers proved with the last 2 Captain America movies that they're the best of the MCU, so to see them handle their magnum opus was well deserved. This isn't just another Ant-Man or Spider-Man Homecoming where it's just a filler movie until the next big one. This was a straight-up war epic, and I doubt we're ever gonna see a film come to this kind of magnitude ever again, even with Endgame coming out. Josh Brolin steals the show as Thanos, obviously, but what I loved was what they did with his character. Considering each of his appearances had a completely different attitude to work off of, it was nice to see this be the definitive Thanos that we get. Even though he wants half of the universe wiped out, you understand his motives and you do feel sympathetic for when he has to make the ultimate sacrifices. The scenes with him and Gamora actually brought me to tears. Not gonna spoil what happens for those who haven't seen it. I mean, it's on Netflix, go watch it. That, and let's not forget some of the biggest action scenes ever put to film, with my favorite being the one-on-one battle that Thanos has with Doctor Strange. With how much he was able to hold his own without using the Time Stone, even managed to impress the Mad Titan. Also, I was glad that this film had the balls to go with its ending. I know it's probably gonna get reversed, but that doesn't mean its impact was still pretty heavy. While it may not be my favorite of the MCU, I could definitely respect it as the best. Much like with BlacKkKlansman, there is a sense of importance that I found with this movie that I'm sad wasn't being talked about as much. The Hate U Give is about a teenage girl named Star, who witnesses her friend get killed by the cops and is now caught in the middle of speaking out against them or risk putting her family at danger. Based on the book by Angie Thomas, Amanda Stenberg blew me away with her performance as Star. I was completely disappointed by The Darkest Minds, but here, she made me want to see her get an Oscar nomination. The reaction she has toward listening both sides is handled very accurately, trying to listen listen to see if you could find your own viewpoint, but with situations like these that are so obvious, it's difficult and heartbreaking when the only thing people cared about are the bad and negative stuff about other people. It shows that media and outsiders, all they want is more drama that's entertainment for them. And the scene where she loses her shit with her subconsciously racist friend is something that I think everybody deep down inside wants to do. Russell Hornsby and Regina Hall are phenomenal as the parents, trying to be the voice of reason for Star as much as they can, but you could tell even for them, they're just as pissed. With every year just getting more and more violent, this movie covers nearly all the sides that the public has on these kinds of matters, as well as showing audiences just how uninformed they can really be about not-so-local violence. I applaud George Tillman Jr. for this, and I look forward to seeing what he brings next. Let me break it to you like this. This is what Venom should have been. If you want to watch a story about a man possessed by a non-human entity to get revenge, this is the movie that does it right. Leigh-Whannell delivered a film and commentary about our dependency for technology in one of the most original, smart, and violent sci-fi films that I've seen that fits alongside RoboCop and Looper perfectly. The action scenes are also pretty heavy as well. While there isn't a kill that goes beyond cutting someone's mouth open like in the trailer, they are still pretty hardcore to watch, especially in the club. Logan Marshall Green, who people call Discount Tom Hardy, proves that he's just as capable as the man. His posture and movements are so robotic, exactly what you would picture it to be. Hell, with the first act, the emotions he goes through with nearly losing everything he values, it's heartbreaking to sit through. The scene where he just bursts into tears as he's just sitting there with his mom helping him out on a daily basis is just... oh, it's heartbreaking. And much like Infinity War, this movie had a pretty ballsy ending that I was not expecting, but I'm glad they did it. And if you haven't seen it yet, definitely check this out next Halloween.
Hey guys, it's Kayla back with another video.
Going into this movie, I had no idea what to expect, but what I ended up getting was a film that truly spoke to the introvert in all of us that we were in middle school. Elsie Fisher has come quite a long way since voicing Agnes from Despicable Me, and as Kayla Day, this is going to be the role I remember her the most for. Her interactions with the people around her remind me so much of myself when I was a kid. I was not popular growing up until I'd moved away, and even purposefully isolated myself because of how hard it was to socialize, and even when I did, it wasn't that easy. I mean, heck, I'm looking at this through the perspective of somebody who didn't get a smartphone until just 5 years ago. But seeing the anxiety of pool parties, trying to make friends with the uncaring ones, being quiet in most situations, realizing that not everything turns out the way you expect, it's all there, and I have had moments similar to those that are perfectly realized in this movie. Bo Burnham is a prime example of a YouTuber going in the right direction as he took his efforts and knowledge proudly to the silver screen. If it's possible for an internet celebrity to push for bigger plans, and not like the YouTube Red, Logan Paul, or working on cheap Tyler Perry movies sort of thing, then I guess that leaves a little bit of hope for anybody aiming big. 8th Grade was truly my favorite film of the year, and it's one that I highly recommend to everybody.
You never know what's next, and that's what makes things exciting and scary and fun.
When did you get Snapchat? What grade?
5th grade.
Fifth grade? What? Yo, see?